Today we're going to talk about my issue with fat fasting. Hey, what's shaking bacon? My name is Bruno Panucci. I hope you're doing well. I'm doing something different with my videos. I've taken the ad out of the middle, and I'm hoping that in return, you will like, comment, and or subscribe to my channel. I'd really appreciate that. It really helps support me. So I've been doing different types of carnivore for quite a while. Well, you think, well, carnivore is a pretty straightforward way of eating. You eat meat, meat has fat, so you're getting a lot of meat and fat, and you should be good. For the vast majority of people who do carnivore, that's the way to go. It's pretty simple. You might have to tweak it a little bit here or there as you fine tune your way of carnivore over time. And that's what I've been doing for the last little while. I've been at a weight plateau for the last year and a half. And lots of people have a hard time believing that you can be at a weight plateau while doing a carnivore diet. Unfortunately, it's true because it's not all about calories, it's about hormones. And I have high fasting insulin. So I tried dealing with high fasting insulin in quite a few ways. Exercise, both with weight training as well as walking. Now, I'm sure there's other hormones in play because I do have hypothyroidism. The issue that I have to deal with the most is my fasting insulin. I need to get that down to lower my body fat. So I switched to a high fat diet last fall and that did okay. I initially went up and then I started to lose weight and ended about 10 pounds less than I was when I started. Then I went back to just regular carnivore, just eating when I was hungry. And in March, I tried doing extremely high fat. And I did extremely high fat for 2 months solid. And I did a 90-10 ratio. Now, Dr. Bright recommends doing that so that you can help balance your hormones, especially your thyroid and your cortisol. Fat helps reduce your cortisol levels. But apparently what happened with me, because maybe it's just because I have a large appetite, but I was trying to stay full on all this fat because I noticed partway through, if I wasn't getting enough fat through the day, my sleep suffered. It's always an easy way for me to tell if I'm not getting enough fat. I will notice that very night I get really poor quality sleep. In that time, I was also doing some fat fasting days. So I was getting maybe, 100 grams of protein throughout the day, and some days maybe even as low as 85. I typically wouldn't recommend that for long windows of time, but when I did fat fasting, I did strict fat fasting for a day, and then I tried it for 2 days, and I had to stop. And I'll tell you why, because every time I do fat fasting, I get cramps. They usually start in my legs. I'm just easily susceptible to getting leg cramps. I learned about a year ago to cut back a little bit on my water intake. I was drinking too much water. And I think what was happening was I was flushing electrolytes out of my body. Now, when you're on a carnivore diet, your body doesn't stay as hydrated as easily as it would with carbohydrates in it. So people are prone to leg cramps, and you have to find your sweet spot with water. Now, I did find my sweet spot with water. I was getting enough water that I was urinating throughout the day, and I felt really good, and my cramps weren't an issue because most people think dehydration is always the cause of leg cramps. It can be, but it can also be too much hydration. Personally, I think you need to adjust your water intake and sometimes get less water on a carnivore diet. After 2 days, the cramping was starting to happen anywhere. I could be sitting there and all of a sudden my side or back would start going into a cramp. And there were more painful cramps than I would normally get. Typically when you get a cramp day to day, doing carnivore or not, it's pretty manageable. You get a cramp and you just kind of stretch it out a little bit or you give it a little bit of time, but these cramps would stay for 5, 10, 15 minutes and get to the point where they're starting to contort my body, where I was cramping and it was actually forcing my body to move. That's how powerful these cramps were. They were these extreme contractions of the muscle. Typically, that is an electrolyte issue. So I thought, okay, this is really weird because I'm not getting lots of protein, but as little protein as I was getting, it was enough to prevent these leg cramps and body cramps. So fat fasting days were things I was staying away from, but I was still doing a high fat version of carnivore. And I put on a lot of weight doing that because I ended up having a lot of fat in a day. And after maybe about a month and a half, I started lowering my fuel intake. And then after about just up until the last few days, I started losing about 5 pounds a day. Now I was still ahead of where I initially was when I started my alternate day fat fasting, as well as my high fat 90-10 carnivore way of eating. Most people, you have to understand this, most people lose weight when they go to a high-fat version of carnivore. Now, I did have some loose stool when I was doing that, but overall it wasn't like it was diarrhea like it was maybe the first couple of weeks because I was getting so much fat in my diet. But I did that to help get fat adapted, and I finally got fat adapted, and all that weight started to come off. And then I screwed it up with the sardine fast. I should have just kept doing what I was doing, and that weight probably would have kept coming off. Maybe it would have stalled on its own. We'll never know. But I went to a 3-day sardine fast just to see how I would feel doing it. And I've had trouble getting that weight off since. So I'm honestly concerned about going to a high fat version of carnivore again because I don't want to have to risk going through all that weight gain if it takes another 2 months just to start losing weight again. But I'm not against doing it. I'm just hesitant. But the one thing that happened was I thought, why am I so prone to this electrolyte issue? And somebody left a comment in one of my videos, and they weren't being a smartass. They just literally said, you know, you look bloated. Your face looks bloated and your jaw and neck look bloated. And I'm like, you know, I've been feeling that myself ever since I started doing high fat. I noticed I just puffed out and it didn't quite seem right to me. So it's nothing dramatic, but it, to me, was noticeable. And this fellow pointed out that it was possibly an electrolyte issue. And I thought, you know, I've been wondering that myself for a while. I'm going to give this a shot again at one time. Now, I think alternate day fat fasting or just a high fat version of carnivore is going to help the vast majority of people who are having trouble with weight loss stalls. But clearly there's something else going on here. But what were the benefits of a high fat diet and why did it keep it up so long? Well, I was trying to get fat adapted. I found when I did regular fasting with just water, I would get really cold. I had tons of energy, but I was tired all the time and I couldn't take a nap through the day. I really stressed my body out, my hair thinned. It was basically like all the symptoms of protein poisoning. But here's the thing, I need to lower my fasting insulin, and doing a high fat version of carnivore didn't work the best for me. Now, 2 months of high fat, 90% of my calories coming from fat and the rest coming from protein still didn't really do the trick. So there's got to be something else at play here. So the beautiful thing was I had all the benefits of fasting where I had tons of energy and I moved well and I felt good. But doing a high fat version of carnivore, I didn't have lots of the negatives I would normally get from water fasting. So I was like, okay, I can see myself doing this. It's also really affordable because I can get fat really cheap. So it's like the expense of carnivore just dropped dramatically. And I could use that right now. Whenever I would break these fat fast days, I noticed within a day or two, my leg cramps and body cramps would go away. And I've always noticed that whenever I've drank too much water or maybe not had enough water, or I did a fat fast and I was getting all these cramps in my body after a day or two, or when I take electrolytes or go off electrolytes, those issues cause lots of cramping. Now, I've always noticed that once I've adapted to what my body's intake, whether it be electrolytes or fat or protein are, that the cramps normally go away. But with these fat fasts, the cramping was getting worse and worse. So I'm not against fat fasting and I'm not against a high fat carnivore diet. In fact, the high fat carnivore diet, like I said, works for most people. It just wasn't the best for me temporarily. Now, maybe I need to do it for 6 months. I'm going to try something a little different in the near future, and I'm going to see how my body adapts to it. I think my body possibly has done enough healing from uric acid and gout issues that I've had pop up and get worse for a little while when I was doing carnivore. I haven't had any problems with that in quite a while now, about 2.5 years. So I think I'm going to start doing some things that might tweak an insulin response for the better. Now I'm going to see how this goes, and I'm going to get into it more in another video. I'm not against fat fasting or a high fat carnivore diet, but it doesn't seem to work that well for me. And if I can find a way to do fat fasting and not get those cramps, then it's going to be well worth it. Now, if I can find something to manage this severe cramping from these fat fasts, then I'm going to try and do that. And I have an idea of what I'm going to do, and I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to try and give it a fair shot for a little while, unless the cramping gets really, really severe. Any challenge I've ever given myself, I've always given myself an option out. If it's not agreeing with my body at all, I'll try and tweak it. And if that's not enough, I will stop it. Any challenge I give myself, because more than anything, quality of life is what it's all about. And I understand maybe you have to sacrifice a little bit to gain a lot more, but sometimes the sacrifice can be so dramatic that it's not worth it. Because when my body is cramping that easily, you have to keep in mind your heart's a muscle too. And I don't want to force my body to go into some sort of starvation mode where all these electrolytes have to get forced into the organs to keep them functioning well because my body's so screwed up. Anyway, thanks a lot. I hope you appreciated watching this video. Thanks a lot for watching this video. I really appreciate your support. Take care.